Hello, I'm Mark Brohan, Senior Vice President, B2B and Market Research at Digital Commerce 360, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. And as always, thank you for coming. We're going to peel back the onion today. We're going to separate some fact from fiction, pick a metaphor, or pick a euphemism, say that 3 times fast. And my point is, we're going to get into beyond the hype of new digital technology and new digital commerce applications as tied to AI and ChatGPT and all the hype out there that's being discussed and kicked around and having people asking all kinds of questions. So welcome to today's webinar, because we are going to get into that and give you practical advice and tell you exactly where this technology is and is not, and what it's going to mean for your entire digital commerce ecosystem, including, of course, the hot points of marketing, merchandising, and personalization. So that is our mission today. And boy, do we have a panel who's going to talk about the worlds of B2B e-commerce, digital marketing, how it's never changed faster, what to keep track of, what to worry about later, and what are some best practices to help you at your organization get this thing right, get this thing ready, and find out what it means as an ROI in a usable digital technology for you going forward. So I'm pleased to welcome just this dynamite panel. So if our panelists could come on, and we have Sanjay from LucidWorks, and Lori from Brilliance, and Justin from Proficient. And I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves, talk about their background and pedigree, and also I've asked each of these panelists to kind of give you their perspective on where they think AI is and is not as it applies to digital e-commerce and the digital technology ecosystem. So we're going to get some pretty good points of view right out of the gate here. So Sanjay, let's start with you. What are your thoughts? And tell us about yourself, and then follow up with where you think AI really is in terms of digital commerce these days, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Mark, and everyone for joining. My name's Sanjay Mehta, and I am head of commerce for LucidWorks. I've been in the space, e-commerce, for about 20 years, not to date myself, but with a lot of the major vendors, many of you may be using, that come from Oracle or ATG and DECA and Hybris and SAP. So been around the block, worked with hundreds and hundreds of B2B customers, wholesale, distribution, manufacturers, and love working with you guys. As far as we think about the e-commerce space and what's happening with AI, and of course, a lot of the hype has been definitely around the generative AI aspect. But again, as we've seen in e-commerce, if you even go way back to recommenders, we've been using, some form of AI, even, through personalization, and of course in search is what we've seen as far as, especially what LucidWorks focuses on. What I think is really a big picture is kind of the idea of being, e-commerce engine's goal was to kind of marry products with customers, right? And do that in the best way to drive conversion, in a way kind of blind to really the customer's intent. And I think where we're getting to is, e-commerce and engines getting more customer centric, really understanding the user, thanks to this sort of bi-directional nature, really the conversational aspects of generative AI, but also the other sort of informational aspects that generative AI or large language models bring in, particularly around really giving you more intelligence about your customer, not just from their interactions or queries, but really looking outside all this unstructured data outside your walls, right? I think that's a tremendous capability. A lot of folks, particularly in B2B, didn't have kind of access to that degree of data, right, without a ton of effort. So I think that's probably one of the most exciting aspects, and we're going to get into a lot more here today, but I thought that would be my big one.
And Lori won't say this, but I will. She's a thought leader. I mean, Lori gets into these technologies on a daily basis of what she does, and she knows what's kind of top of mind with both manufacturers and distribution companies when it comes to these kinds of new applications. So Lori, talk about yourself just a little bit, and then what's your
Sure.
take on some things that that Sanjay just mentioned?
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks. What most people remember about me is that I worked at NASA Johnson Space Center as a flight controller for the space shuttle program. That was before I got into e-commerce, and I started Brilliance Business Solutions in 1998. So I've been also dating myself. I've been in this for 25 years. And what's really interesting, and as Mark said, we focus on working with manufacturers and distributors implementing e-commerce. Sanjay, to build off of what you were saying, I just think it's so interesting when I look back at all of the time in this space and the fact that in many ways AI in and of itself isn't new. And yet there's clearly a lot of attention to it, and a lot the uses for AI with generative AI are really speeding up. The amount of innovation that's happening in this space is really interesting. And to me, that's where I really see future potential in terms of where it's going is opportunities for organizations. Mid-market manufacturers and distributors can sometimes be a little bit slower to adopt technology, and yet the opportunity with generative AI and with many of the tools out there is that they have opportunities to respond to creating a great customer experience more efficiently, and move faster than they might have been able to in the past, enabling their teams to be more efficient. So both in terms of customer facing, but also internally helping them to be more efficient internally too.
Now, here's something you don't know. Did you know that Justin Racine is the Elvis of B2B commerce? Because he's the king. He's the king. What I mean by that is he is the king of knowing probably B2B user experience better than I think anybody frankly I know. And that's why we were lucky enough to have him as the panelist today. So, I mean, a lot of this is user experience driven. And so we were just kind of chatting about that just a little bit today. So I'm going to ask the king of B2B user experience now to kind of weigh in here. So Justin, what do you think on some of the thoughts about what Sanjay and Lori just made, coupled with the fact that a lot of this is UI driven? What do you think? Okay.
Well, yeah, first off, Mark, thanks for having me back, and it's great to be along these panelists. I don't know that I can live up to those expectations, but yes, I have been in the B2B e-commerce or digital commerce arena for my entire career, so I kind of grew up in the space. But yeah, I think, both great points by Sanjay and Lori. I think, the one thing that I'll add on to what they said is that, yeah, user experience and customer desires are always going to push the envelope and drive future experiences. We like to say that your last best experience is the only one rememberable, right? A consumer doesn't owe you anything from the purchase they made yesterday, right? You have to continually exceed their expectations on a daily basis if you want to retain them as a customer, because your competitor is out there waiting to eat your lunch and steal that customer. So yeah, I do believe that, from the user standpoint, I don't think folks are demanding AI within commerce today. I think their demands are the same. We just want the best possible experience, and if that means AI, okay, so be it. I mean, we might have some deflectors who are, anti-artificial intelligence, but that's going to be in the minority. Most people just want the best possible experience, which applies on the B2C side, of course, but also on the B2B side. I mean, we've said this many times that B2B buyers are just consumers in disguise buying for a brand. So the real interesting intersection, though, is that I believe that AI can work side by side with employees of B2B businesses, and it doesn't necessarily need to replace their role. AI is a tool, just like the internet is a tool, and when that came out, people probably said the same thing. Oh, this is going to replace jobs, right? And in some small instances, it might have, but holistically, it made the world a more connected place and allowed us to do our jobs better. And I think AI is in that same category. It's still early, but that's kind of how I'm viewing it. And I do believe that users currently care about the best experience. They don't care if AI is within it or not. But as more and more folks start to leverage generative AI specifically to conduct online searches, that type of online search that is long trailed versus short, right? Instead of I want to buy Nike running shoes, they might say I want to buy Nike running shoes for an upcoming half marathon that I'm running that is likely going to be raining and in the woods, right? That's a very long search term. So those types of interactions and expectations will start to bleed over into commerce as we move forward. So that's my initial thoughts, but definitely one.
you could have worn the jumpsuit today, but that's okay. So that's a great answer. So here's our first question. Sanjay, I want to kind of pivot back to you on this, but just one, by the way, there are a couple of housekeeping notes. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation, but by all means, please use your chat box now to send us a question or two, and we'll try and get to it during the course of our webinar today. And then, by the way, if you have problems, same thing, send us a note, and one of our tech staff can kind of help you out with your tech problem. So my first question, though, Sanjay, pivoting back to you, is what are the practical ways that organizations can leverage generative AI, for that's right for them? But on top of that, can you explain where is the function of this? Who's got to worry about it? I mean, if you look at the broad spectrum of digital commerce technology ecosystem, where does this live? I mean, is it a platform thing, a CRM thing, a marketing thing, all the above? So I got to tell you, I think people are so nascent on this topic, they don't know where it fits other than where it's going to fit someplace. And then the second part of that is practically how can they get going on this? So what are your thoughts on both those two parts of the equation?
Yeah, for really a whole stack, like a commerce platform, I mean, I think it's really all about, I mean, it hits all areas, right? It's everything from like customer acquisition, marketing, through the engagement, right, conversion, all the way through, post-purchase service, potentially also all the way into like the order management functions, right, and support and training. So I mean, I would definitely see applications everywhere. What I think we're seeing though is really when we think about practical application, and in particular for B2B, we look at kind of the biggest pain points they have, and a lot of it may start with where are there certain things we can intervene where it's a low risk impact on the business. With, again, we have 100 million users using ChatGPT. I don't see one customer trying to put a chat bot quite yet, like to mimic that sort of thing, right? They're looking at folks like our panelists here, like to advise really where should we apply this in the business. And the biggest area I'm seeing right now is definitely around improving your understanding of your customer and improving your product, basically the way you're positioning your product. And one form of that, for example, is developing customer and product insights. For example, how's my product? Some of you guys might be aware of like digital shelf. So how's my product presented against my peers or competitors, right? And these large language models can access that and give you that type of insight. What's my customer sentiment of these products? Even looking internally, like what's the cause of certain problems? What is it about a product that's causing problems, or what's aspects of the products are really influential in purchases? That actually influences a lot of even your product planning, buying, all the way through to really the product content itself, product enrichment. That's probably one of the bigger ones we're seeing, right, is enriching of products and looking at the LLM to tell you what to enrich. It doesn't mean just bloat your descriptions or titles. It might mean you need to add certain attributes that are important to folks that aren't represented, right? And that's, I think, some of the big stuff we're seeing a lot of folks across industry looking at, to start with. And then, of course, introducing it, into other areas, for example, augmenting your existing pages, your search experience itself, right, and moving kind of down that path. So there's that practical sort of approach of starting at a low risk first and then moving down to something where it's more customer facing or interacting with the customer, such as a virtual assistant. So that would be, I kind of think there's like a whole journey there that most folks are taking.
And Lori, I can see you're kind of nodding your head here. So can you build on that? I mean, the first question is inside the digital technology stack. I hate that term. I'm going to use it. The stack, the technology roadmap, the ecosystem, to use other cliches. Where does this fit? And then what are some practical applications that people can use this for? What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I believe it's, I heard Sanjay say this, and I agree. Like, I think it's everywhere. Is the real, like, there are applications for, in many ways, like every member of your team to be looking at how you can be incorporating generative AI to be more effective as a part of your work. Now, if you're looking like who's going to lead that organizationally, I think it can come from different places. It can come from, an organization's CIO. It could come from an organization's CEO. It really could come, but it also can come, I think, from the ground up. It can come from individuals, and this is, in some organizations I see, like one very easy, quick win that I think many people are already doing, and you see more products incorporating into the base product itself, is improving product descriptions, leveraging generative AI. And like many users are just already doing that, even if it's not in the tool they're using, they're leveraging ChatGPT, because we all know manufacturers or distributors who have like really bare bones product descriptions. And that's a way for them to create something quickly. So those are really easy, easy quick wins. Email, there are easy quick wins in email to be improving headlines, or sorry, subject lines and your copy of an email. But then there are other really cool practical applications to use conversational AI agents, to allow both to automate kind of a chatbot capability that's learning on the fly in terms of how to improve that interaction with the customer, to translate on the fly so it's able to chat with customers in different languages, or enable a real person on your side, on your organization side, to be chatting in English when your end customer is not. And it's translating that interaction in real time. There's just some really amazing applications that exist today that can be put in place and see a really quick time to value.
Remember in grade school, this time of year with Halloween, and everybody had to kind of bring a treat to class, and then you got all this stuff kind of piling up, and you're just counting the clock, tick, 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 until the teacher says, "Who wants a treat?" Everybody goes, "I do." I use that analogy because if you ask anybody out there who's developing technology, do you have an AI application? I do.
Yeah, right.
So I guess my question to you, Justin, is how does an organization define the guidelines for what is and what should not be the best way to analyze and then be implemented? Some of these AI applications that Sanjay and Lori were just talking about.
Great question. Very slippery slope. You have compliance issues. If you're in the medical product space, you have HIPAA and PHI. You have, all of these different parameters around, leveraging AI with data in a way that could potentially put customers at risk. So, and to be very honest and frank with you, I don't think it's fully baked out yet. So I don't know that you can sit here and say this is the exact steps that you should follow. It's going to be different for each individual business. But I can say what both Sanjay and Lori had alluded to is that every business knows their business better than anyone else. So they're going to know where they can start first. You have to kind of take baby steps into this arena, because not only is it implementing the AI technology that you're choosing, but you might even need to leverage change management activities to build new teams to manage these new AI ML engines. So, you're going to have to change how your organization does things. You might have to hire new roles in. You're going to have to change how customer support talks and communicates with sales and all of these things. So, when you're looking to enter into this space and leverage AI technology, you need to keep in the forefront of your head that you need people at the end of the day to help set this up. And sure, you can go through and try to pick the right platform, but organizationally, you need to be sound and be ready and have a plan of how this is going to be integrated and incorporated into how you do business on a day-to-day basis. So that's a long answer, but when you're going to leverage different pieces of technology, what I always tell people is that you have to do what's right for your business right now. You have to align to whatever business challenges you're trying to solve with this AI technology. Don't just do it to do it. If it doesn't make sense for you to spend dollars there, we'll tell our clients all day, hey, listen, why are you trying to do this? If you're doing it because it's making headlines each day, that's not the right reason. You need to be doing it because you're trying to alleviate and solve a business problem through technology. So that's where you should start. What problems do you have that maybe can't be solved? And how can you leverage AI to come in and work with your employees to better serve up buying experiences for customers? So slippery slope, tough to answer directly, but that's the best way to at least get started.
Well, I see both Sanjay and Lori kind of taking their they've got some good points to make here. So, Lori, let's pivot back to you. I mean, how do you establish guidelines? And then do you have like a best practice that you can recommend for how an organization can indeed put together a guideline for rolling this stuff out, but to kind of doing it right at the same time?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at leveraging generative AI technology, one important thing that is important to me for our business, and as I think about advising others, is to be aware of privacy, data privacy, what Justin referenced, but also like your proprietary information, like what are you sharing that with? And like, does whatever generative AI tool, whatever software you're working with, does it train on your inputs? Who else could the inputs be shared with? It's important to look at an organization's terms of services, FAQs, dig into that so that you're aware. With many of these models, understanding what it's going to do with the information you're giving it when you're submitting data in is really important. Obviously, it's really important when you're leveraging generative AI to think about how you're going to review what comes back. What comes back is often really, maybe 70% of the way there, but you shouldn't just hit, like as in the case of a product description. It might do a pretty good job of getting it much better than what you had before, but you don't want to just hit publish. It always needs to go through some form of review. And then the other thing to think about is bias. Like when we're using tools like this, are there ways that bias is being introduced that's in the tool itself that we want to think about how we mitigate? So just some risks to keep in mind with working with it. And I think if folks are keeping that in mind to start, it's really powerful what it can do.
And Sanjay, what do you think?
Yeah, just again, like add on exactly to what Justin and Lori mentioned about again the data protection and the ethics piece, like the bias and that. I think probably the number one piece from a business perspective is the ROI aspect for sure. How do we measure this? Like how do we test and measure the impact? That's like probably like the biggest one across all these use cases that we're seeing. And helping. Again, advise a customer that there's not just one path here. Right now there's hundreds of models, for example, for large language models, right? And it's the idea of kind of using the right tool for the right job to drive the most kind of efficient ROI gain, I would call it, right? And that's probably the bigger one from also from a guideline perspective of reducing kind of the errors or hallucinations you might hear. Easier to kind of ground, and performance, is another aspect, challenge that's kind of come up. I think you've probably seen how long sometimes it takes for these engines to generate a response that's not, tolerable by a lot of users. So those sorts of things are considerations that, should be taken, into account, I think, as well. And the grounding, I think, has been mentioned here as well, right? It is there's some paths where you don't have to use everything that the model generated. You can actually use your own content and have a model generate the content for you. For example, retrieval augmented generation is a topic that's been going around, right? Where it's using your content so that it kind of minimizes some of the incorrect responses, for example. And I think that's kind of the idea, is having a partner to help you, make sure you do this right and do it with the highest ROI gain.
I got to say once again, maybe the next time we all get together and do one of these kind of webinars, you won't see me. You'll see a sign that says AI on the back of the chair here. Because I got to tell you, you read about, anybody who's in my line of work, all this journalism stuff, whatever we do for a living, going the way of the dinosaur because AI can do it 3 times faster than you. So, we're sitting here writing about this stuff day in, day out, and, I said, well, I got to try this thing. I got to tell you, I signed up for ChatGPT, and I was trying to write some marketing stuff, and I don't think I'm a bad marketing guy, with all of my years of knowledge. I went and I typed in, I think, 3 criteria for what I was trying to write about, and Lori, to your point, it needs a human check. But I got to tell you, boy, was it good. Frankly, to be dead honest here, it would probably have taken me a couple of 3-4 hours to really fine tune it with my vast knowledge to kind of do that. I can see why this stuff is gaining traction. But having said my little story there, what I want to ask next is, A, what does this really mean for B2B or digital commerce, Lori? Let's start with you. And, get the hype away from all this stuff. Is this stuff game changing, or is this just one new application that is going to help things along, but it's not, it's overhyped, and a year from now it's going to be standard e-commerce procedure. It's good stuff, but it's not groundbreaking, earth-shaking, gotta have it, game-changing stuff. So we have the hype that's out there. Put it in perspective here. Is that a game changer, or what does this really mean for the person who's got to worry about this kind of technology applied to the bread and butter customer e-commerce experience, if you would?
Yeah, well, it both is, to your point, it both is hyped, like there's a ton of hype, and also like it shouldn't be ignored because things are moving really quickly right now. One, and I think as others have referenced, it's not just about, we talk about examples of how it can be used practically, that, we talk about like things like a product description or things like that, but that's really a simple use case. There are other more complex use cases, like where you can be leveraging generative AI to create a digital employee, like Amelia or other conversational AI agents, like enable you to create a digital version of like a chat interface to perform a specific function. Or there are chatbots that can enable a store admin, or I think there are chatbots in development that could enable a store admin to go on an e-commerce site and say, between 5 and 10 p.m. tonight, I want to increase pricing on the site by 10% and then lower it at 8 a.m. Tomorrow. Like, I don't think those things are in production yet, but I think those things are coming. And so to me, the ability, what's really exciting, I think, about generative AI and e-commerce for the future is thinking about how it can enable organizations to provide a better customer experience through automating repetitive tasks, enabling them to create, digital technology that can help them serve customers better, and being able to do that faster, more efficiently. That's what really gets me excited.
Sanjay, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're the technology business here, so your word is, you guys are out doing this stuff. So once again, GetPad is, hype, game changing. I want you to address that because you're actually building this stuff. But then, in terms of how it directly applies, you think, to the B2B commerce experience, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, maybe I'll try to like quantify it a bit, but there's all these different KPIs that it might impact, right? For example, like task efficiency, or for example, for the customer service agent, right? The productivity gain for employees, right? From a B2B perspective, doing analytics or insights, for example. There's, of course, from kind of the e-commerce perspective, things we definitely see shortening the purchase path, right? Reducing purchase friction. And of course, those outcomes help with revenue, conversion, but also in increasing customers for those that are looking to, grab new customers. That's obviously, some of the kind of metrics that we see from both from like a customer facing, but also like the business operations piece. I think, the other, the bigger one kind of like as a future piece, of course, like right now we do see, particularly from a search perspective, again, it's stateless in a way, right? It's not carrying your context over as much, right? Even Google, it's more like using some forms of personalization, right, to carry what like you've done and what you clicked on and carrying to the next. But if you think about like this sort of conversational kind of dialogue now, and really carrying a loop almost, right? Almost like a whole conversational loop in purchasing. I think it's really like that, emulating that kind of virtual salesperson, right? I think that's a big deal. I think that's probably the bigger one we see from, coming from a user experience perspective. And but again, I think like Lori mentioned, we've always had this in sort of AI commerce world was, AI first versus AI assist, and definitely thinking that this is, AI assist. So a lot of folks, again, this is going to make them that much more productive, even the customer more productive for that matter, right? In our purchasing.
So Justin, kind of the same questions, but just a different take, which is Ecom 101, either B2C or B2B, it takes a village. What I mean by that is, you know, there's no one individual at any organization, either B2B or B2C, that can do e-commerce all by themselves. Those days are gone. You know, so inside any organization, it's multi-divisional, it's multi-department, it's your dream team, if you're going to put it that way. My question to you is, a lot of companies with new applications like this, there's a big disconnect, and I see it every single day. In other words, do you intend to do this? Is it a big priority? Yes, 75%. How soon are you going to do it? Don't know. Why not? Budget, people, you know, convincing, all, I mean, the challenges to these kind of new technologies tend to come within, and they tend not to concentrate on one person. So my question to you is, as you talk about guidelines and as we kind of talk about what this means to e-commerce and in the trenches, customers and transactions and order processing and all that, who's got to be part of the team here? Who's got to worry about this? I mean, is it IT driven, like a lot of e-com is from technology standpoint? Is it marketing driven? So my point is, I want you to address the internal cross-building effort that's got to go into what this means for e-commerce if you really want to separate the hype and make this thing work for you. Who's got to worry about it on the team and what capacity?
Well, IT is definitely sitting at the core of it, that's for sure, because this is a piece of technology. So without IT leaders and groups implementing and maintaining this and working with different business teams, it's not going to come to fruition and come to life. But the rest of the organizational elements is dependent on the use case. I would say it has to have executive C-level buy-in for sure. Those folks are going to be writing the checks, but it's dependent. A good example is if you're trying to leverage, you know, AI from a merchandising standpoint, then you're obviously going to have to involve the e-commerce, digital commerce teams to do that. If you're trying to leverage AI from a predictability standpoint from buying inventory of products in, you're going to have to work with your purchase and fulfillment teams, right? That's a big area that AI can play a massive role in the B2B space, is how to become more predictive with inventory and buying and allocation of products. And, you know, if an item is ordered in on a container coming into the distribution center, can you show that inventory as being live on the site, you know, that day? Because in theory, it's going to arrive. It may not be on the shelves yet, but it's coming in, right? And how can AI message that to consumers or buyers based upon their previous buying behavior? So it's dependent. IT for sure has to be involved, but each organization, as you alluded to, Mark, has said, hey, this is a massive priority for us. Well, how much have you done? And a lot of folks have said not a lot, right? Because they're focused in on the head down day-to-day things. But eventually folks are going to have to lift their heads up and look to the future. It's the same story of, you know, go back 15, 20 years in the B2B space and say, hey, when are you going to invest in a digital platform where folks can buy products versus sales reps? And some companies are like, yeah, that's a high priority for me, but we haven't done anything yet. It's the same thing here. The organizations that are able to dip their toes in the water, if you will, of AI across their business and experiment in different areas where there's low risk to the business day to day, but high potential ROI opportunities, that's where folks should start. They should set up different focus groups or tiger teams to explore this AI and try to learn how the technology can be useful, and select folks internally that may not matter if they're in IT or not, but truly understand what the business is, the B2B business, and try to build some use cases to get some momentum behind it, where they can show the executives and say, this is what we were able to do within this AI sort of, you know, portal or pilot, and here's how we think we can expand it across the organization. So that's a long answer. The short answer is IT absolutely has to be involved. The rest of the organization is dependent upon what might make the most sense for your business to start first.
So Sanjay, I want to pivot back to you and just kind of maybe build on just a couple things that Lori and Justin just said, which is, you know, a lot of companies have a set technology budget, and even in this current business slowdown where people are being cautious, you know, the surveys that we do, with the crowd out there still look like that the platform spending or the tech spending on digital applications and e-commerce technology are still trending up. Maybe not as much as in previous years, but I got to tell you, I think we're looking at more companies realizing how critical this stuff is versus not. So they're willing to kind of fund more generally from our research than cut back. My question to you is, you guys are actually developing applications, but can you talk about some best practice advice that people on this webinar can take and use for doing the due diligence on the vendor technology, the application technology, the questions to ask? Because I think this stuff is so new, there's not a user requirement guideline out there just yet. I'm sure smart people are writing them now, but I haven't seen one. I mean, Lori knows this. You can download a punch list for vetting an e-commerce platform guy in 3 seconds flat, or you know who to talk to within the organization to kind of do that for the CEO who wants answers. But I don't think I've seen that just yet for this new stuff for AI. So yeah, a long question, but the core question is back to you. Who should be looking at and vetting this technology in a way that's going to make sense, because the marketing folks have to look at it, you know, the merchandising folks, the procurement, supply chain, and then finally finance and the rest of them. So who needs to vet this from a technology vendor perspective, and what's your best practice and thoughts on that?
Yeah, like, you know, Justin that alluded to a little bit, like the IT, I think being kind of the hub of a lot of that decisioning is probably makes the most sense, and is really what we're seeing happening for the most part, since they're servicing, their customers are marketing and merchandising and, you know, customer service and those folks, right? And so where I think again that audience, when they think about, you know, partner, lock-in is a concern we see, which is, are you locking me into one model or one approach? I want to have the flexibility to actually have some configurability or try different models, but this is so new, we don't even know maybe what the best approach or mix might be. I might want to use multiple models for that matter, right? We're seeing things like that now. So making sure you have you know, a provider that can give you that type of flexibility, and most importantly, give you the framework to experiment and test it, I think is key, right? Which is, you know, not just flipping on a switch and changing things without sort of some form of test, like an A/B test or things like that, to really measure the outcomes, I think is a big one. And then the other piece is making sure, and I think, you know, Justin and Lori brought up the idea of like compliance and data governance, and making sure that that is taken care of by the application or your partner. That's critical, because last thing you need are, you know, a trail of lawsuits and things, because you know, FINRA, if you're a financial space, or HIPAA, as Justin mentioned, right? Those sorts of things. And even in e-commerce, we all know with the, you know, the GDPR, for example, and here, the, you know, Customer Privacy Act in California, those sorts of things. I mean, these are all important considerations that your partner should give you as far as caveats, and the platform should be able to support.
But Lori, you're shaking your head here, and can you follow up on that? Because here's my question to you, which is the same vein of things, which is, we're talking about guidelines, we're talking about best practices, we're talking about where this fits in within the core competency of what you want to use this AI for. But here's my point. Here's my question to you. I mean, you know, you do this for a living every single day. So does Justin, which is, when it comes to maybe a more established technology, i.e. an e-commerce platform, you respond to RFPs that have distinct user requirements, tech requirements, all of that. But I don't know, I mean, this AI stuff is so new and so hyped and just so new. I don't think companies have that yet, or do they? Or if they have to kind of put together tech specs and user specs so they can find out and begin kind of the whole vendor selection vetting process, how do they go about doing that? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, and I think that maybe to go back to a point that Justin made earlier, like it's at the end of the day, it's about like solving a problem, and it's about it's either solving a customer's problem, solving a business problem that exists, and in many ways, the generative AI technology is a part of many of the software platforms that folks have already been using. It's not necessarily that people are shopping simply for an AI software. It's more often that as a part of either their existing stack they already have, or a new stack. If they're looking at a replatform, they're looking at a part of like what AI and generative AI capabilities do they have to help me be more powerful. One example, so we're an Optimizely partner. Within their content marketing platform, they have tools to help marketers be more efficient leveraging AI. They have tools within their experimentation to help recommend what experiments you want to run leveraging AI. So like the RFP may still be, I'm looking for, for software to support our experimentation strategy. It's a matter of looking at how generative AI within that can be helping you to do those things even more efficiently and effectively.
So I got to tell you, Justin, I'll just be flat out. I believe in our research. Paul and I talk to everybody every single day. We ask a lot of questions about this, and this, and I think people tell us, kind of like what's out there. So here's my point. Are you going to do AI? Yes. Are you going to do it? Yes. How soon are you going to do it? Soon. You going to pay for it? We think so. I mean, that's what the market in a short stack is kind of telling us. My question to you is, building upon what Sanjay and Lori once just said here, is, are you seeing a faster rollout of AI now because of the promise this thing could be? Or are you seeing the disconnect, which is, oh, yes, we intend to do it, but boy, we're stuck trying to figure out how to use it? I mean, that's a disconnect that applies to a lot of technology problems across e-commerce here, new or otherwise. We see it all the time. What about this instance? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of folks who are exploring the idea of doing it. We're working with some pretty large clients in this space within the AI arena across different technologies, right? Not just using one specific one that's out there, but using different vendors that we partner with. And each one has different use cases. But what I will say to a lot of folks is that, Lori alluded to this as well too, is a lot of businesses are already using AI. They're just not using it in the branded way that we're known to see on the news, and generative AI and all of these things, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning is technology. It is a piece of software that folks have been using, whether they've known it or not, within their digital commerce platforms for years. Product upsell, cross sells is using artificial intelligence to make those suggestions. Like LucidWorks on the call here, right? Their technology is being leveraged to help folks find the right products in on-site search. So like these technologies have been around. What's different and what's changed is that generative AI, where it's taking on more human-like characteristics, and that is a new way of thinking around something that didn't have human characteristics before, which I think is extremely important, and I'll tell you why. We as humans and consumers, sure, we want to do things on our own, but as a human species, we require human connection. So as much as we want to say that AI is going to replace the world and all of these different things, Mark, it goes back to your previous point on how you use generative AI to type up a piece of marketing material, and yourself, and I'm a writer as well, right? I contribute with Digital Commerce 360 and some other publications. Could that replace my column that I have on a monthly basis? And my answer has always been no, and people argue with me. And what I'll say is that generative AI doesn't have the personality that humans have. And sure, that can be built into some AI instances, which I do think is important. But human interaction will always still play massively within the B2B space, because a B2B buyer wants to be able to talk to someone else and have them deal with the problem, right? Let them deal with it. And in a lot of cases, the current generation of buyers are not comfortable with technology holistically, let alone generative AI or any machine learning that might be out there. So the human-to-human connection will continue to be there. But as these younger generations start to come in and change the way that folks buy, obviously AI is going to play a more important role. So I kind of see it potentially going that way. But it's always important to remember that, you know, AI doesn't work without humans there to tell the AI what to do until it can start to think and interact on its own to make, you know, buying experiences better. So that's my biased opinion, and I'm kind of sticking with it.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, Mark, Justin, I just really love the point of, you know, it's not going to replace us. You know, certainly we, you know, as everyone has been following the news, you know, we had developers on our team who are like, oh, you know, is it going to start doing development? Is this going to replace us? And what we see, you know, like specifically in that instance, and I think in across the board in terms of use cases, it can help us become faster and more effective at the things that we, you know, at repetitive tasks. So, you know, our developers are now leveraging, you know, after talking with clients and getting their approval, GitHub Copilot, which helps them to code faster, you know, to create better quality code, to write use case or test cases faster. It helps us to do things faster and better. It's not going to replace. It's not going to, you know, talk with the customer and figure out what they want and figure out the right way to go build it. You know, it's not going to do all those things. Someone still has to drive the technology. But it can help us to be more effective in doing the things that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. By all means.
I was just gonna say, like, a final point and a way to think about this, and a good analogy is, you know, I love Mark. I love his personality. I love his articles. I love the way that he writes. If a AI engine is writing that, I'm not going to be as interested to read it because I don't associate the article with a personality. I know that that is a different sort of use case, but that's why I read Mark's articles in Digital Commerce 360. The same applies to the B2B world as well. AI is a tool, as Lori alluded to, that's going to help folks. But at the end of the day, it's relationships that create the stickiness within this B2B buying world. And without that, it just becomes a transaction. And when it becomes a transaction, people can buy anywhere and there's no loyalty. So the human component will always need to be important.
And by the way, that $20 I paid you by Zelle to say that, it should be your company. But Sanjay, here's a very important point I'd like you to address next, building upon, we have a good discussion here, and I'm hoping that we are framing this for the webinar attendee to show that we're drilling down to show what the real world use case of this stuff is. Now, here's my question to you, because you're in the trenches building this stuff. One of the biggest, we all know that the digital buyer changed completely holistically over COVID, old news, blah, blah. More self-service technology, old news, that's what they want. Now, here's my question. AI, of course, is not new. It's not new. You've had a chat box of personalization, which has been around B2C since I started kicking around this stuff. You've had some form of AI. But we're getting a clear sense here of where I think some of the commerce applications are heading. Lori hit on one about, I want to change my pricing from here to there, and I want to do it between these hours. And, you know, that is a very innovative and fast approach to something that might take, you know, somebody else a longer time to do. But the struggle with reaching the user experience, with reaching that digital first buyer who's driving all this, is that they come across from not just one channel, the e-commerce side or the app, they come across different ways of things. Everything is digitally driven these days across what the channel is. And my question to you is, I know for a fact, and so does Paul Demery, and maybe you guys do too, when we ask people out there in B2B land, what is your biggest challenge? It's we're trying to figure out the pathways the customer is coming to us from these digital touch points or channels. And you know what? They mix and match so fast that people tell us we have a problem figuring that out. Now, the problem is also the opportunity. So my question to you, and I'm sorry it's a long one, Sanjay, is how can AI help a company or an organization build the user experience or the e-commerce applications that's going to help speed up and expedite that cross-channel, omni-channel, endless assortment, endless aisle need that the buyers want today? I would think AI would have a role with that. Faster product clustering, price changing like Lori just mentioned, but I want you to hit that one head on. Let's talk about that. So how can this new technology help leverage how companies are dealing with their digital customers coming at them across multiple channels. That's the core question.
Yeah, yeah. I think this even goes beyond, just this generative AI conversation, because I think you probably heard the multimodals or right, like sort of multi-interface type of customer, right? And I have two little children right now too, and I think about the way they search. They don't even type anymore. They're doing voice for everything, right? On the remote or on their devices. And so thinking about that sort of ease of use, but the idea of like speech recognition, right? And Lori mentioned translations in any language. The customer might come in any language, it may come in any medium. So voice being one. Vision is another one, right? Where for B2B, there's a lot of applications where you may need to take a photo of something, right? And or compare two things and see what the machine has to say. And of course, there's the usual use case of text that we see, or your click patterns, as we know as well. And I think that part of the AI of being able to service and communicate in a multimodal way, I think is pretty key. But then, more importantly, understanding that consumer as one, still, regardless of how they're interacting, right? So we're gathering whether they're speaking or they're taking photos or they're coming in from a YouTube video, they're coming in from some other type of research article that's on DC360. We're able to kind of connect all these sorts of aspects that what like AI can do. You've seen some of this forms in customer data platforms already, right, where they're sort of predicting the customer, but also just bringing all these sort of interfaces together to understand that customer is one, and their intent and their journey and where they are and what's the right vehicle or method to speak with them, right, or converse with them is I think the big one where AI can come in, right? And again, it's predicting what's the right, whether it's the right product assortment, what's the right content. Am I showing them a video? Am I showing a mix of different things, right, based on how they came in? And where they are in their journey, I think is really a big one that gets me, pretty excited.
So Lori, pivoting back to you for this part of the conversation, I don't think personally this stuff lives up to hype like game changing. But what I do think it lives up to is changing, and rapidly. So my question to you is, you foreshadowed that pricing as one e-commerce application that you're seeing roots of that now. I guess my question is, if we're on the same webinar 6 months from now, do you think we'll still be in the pre-stage, pre-looking at it, thinking things out, or do you think that we'll be farther along the path where, yeah, we just launched our pricing engine for this, or yeah, we just launched our expedite chat box for product clustering for this kind of thing? So personally, I think that's where it's going, but I'm not the expert here. You are. What do you think? What are you looking at?
Well, I think it will depend on the organization. I think there are going to be some folks that are putting things in place relatively quickly, and I think the way I think the software is getting released quickly. The question is, how quickly is it adopted? And some of the technology is already available now, and I think there were many mentions on our conversation of like starting with low risk activities. I think it's a matter of ideally you're kind of collaborating with your team, having sessions with many folks on your team to brainstorm about ways that they could see leveraging generative AI as a part of their work, because at the end of the day, the tools are only as good as the folks that use them. Like if you have a software that can do something, but you don't have people who understand what to do with it, then your organization is not going to be enabled to move that much more quickly with it. And so I think there are opportunities to, recently we had an event where we split our a group into teams, and we had a challenge to solve a problem with generative AI, with ChatGPT, and we used prompt engineering, and we had teams and saw who could do a better job of it, right? I think it's enabling your team to get comfortable with the tools, to ask questions, and to think about how they might use it. so that you can really support organizations taking those steps forward.
So I got to tell you, this has been a fascinating conversation, but this is our last question, and I kind of call it the lightning round. So we're going to pivot to Lori again, and then Justin, then we're going to kind of give Sanjay kind of our wrap-up question here. But, we've covered a lot of really good ground, but I'm a big believer on these kinds of webinars, which is giving people actual practical advice, best practices for what they should do first and foremost. So, Lori, why don't you start with? We've covered a lot of ground here and hopefully explained the topic better and why it matters and where it's going. But now, for the folks out there who have to kind of see if this fits for them, what's your best practice, end of day advice on how to get started the right way or advance the right way?
Yeah, I would say to start, look at the software you're already working with today and ask that vendor, what new capabilities are you developing related to using AI, and then get some training and start playing with it, practice with it.
All right. And Justin, what do you think? What's your best advice, your best practice, if you will, on a company who is on a webinar like this, maybe has heard some pretty good information, but really wants to kind of go back and say, okay, how do I do this right from the get-go? What are your two best practices right there, you think?
Do whatever's best for your customer. It's always going to be first and foremost. If that's AI, great. If it's not, then move on to something else and potentially come back to it. But if you do believe that artificial intelligence is good for your business and good for your customer, you really have to start with what Lori talked about, is what technology you've already invested in that's there, but you have to determine how AI can help what we're calling unified commerce, right? So taking omnichannel and moving it into where you're putting the customer at the center of all these other different applications, and how can artificial intelligence be leveraged to tee up predictability around certain things, like I'm a heavy machine operator and I have sensors on vehicles that are telling me that parts are going to break soon, and helping the sales rep curate a list of products to suggest to someone. So the first and foremost is definitely do what's best for your customer. But if AI is best for your customer, try to find ways to work it in that help all of the pieces of technology that you've already invested in communicate better.
And Sanjay, we have about a minute left here, so bring it home for us. How is LucidWorks working with its customers and potential customers to make this happen in a realistic way that's going to grow their e-commerce space? What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with benchmarking the business, certain areas where we may impact, like in e-commerce. How is your, for example, revenue per visit, or in customer service, right? What's your deflection rate or resolution rate? Those sorts of things, right? And benchmarking it and understanding where you are falling behind, or where there's some room for improvement, and then identifying where AI might be able to help you in a more ROI gaining way, right? I think that's kind of the big one. And so really breaking down what we're seeing. And of course, we work with so many customers. We have some observations, and there's a lot of research out there, as you guys do, on use cases where there are some real stunning impacts. So we're looking at where a business maybe needs the most help, whether it's around the customer experience or merchandising or content, those sorts of things, and then kind of aiming there.
We appreciate that. Good summary, if you would. So Justin, Sanjay, and Lori, thank you for a fast build and just a marvelous discussion. So for our attendees today, we thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.